Hey, Rick Sayes here. Welcome to another episode of the Outdoor Biz podcast, where I hope to provide entertaining conversations with retailers, brand managers, athletes, executives, and others in the outdoor biz to get their stories, tips, strategies, productivity tricks, and ideas that you can apply and take your career or business to the next level. Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. I've used Audible for many years now. I'm on the road a lot, and Audible allows me to enjoy the great books I discover or are recommended by friends. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at www.audibletrial.com/theoutdoorbizpodcast. There are over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. Start your 30-day free trial with Audible today. Hey guys, this episode is with Conservation Alliance Executive Director John Sterling. John tells us about how he got his start in the outdoors, the great work done at the Conservation Alliance, and how you can help. Enjoy. Hey guys, today I'm speaking with Conservation Alliance Executive Director John Sterling. Welcome to the show, John.
Hey, thanks, Rick.
Yeah, good to have you on.
Yeah, great to be here.
So let's start out with your first exposure to the outdoors. Was it as a kid, or did you get into it later in life? How'd that all come about?
Yeah, I grew up in Portland, Oregon.
Yeah.
And my parents were pretty active skiers and backpackers. So, I was one of three kids, and we spent a lot of time in the winter up at Mount Bachelor, and then in the summers we'd go backpacking mostly in the Central Oregon Cascades.
Nice.
And then as I got a little older, my dad and I, he loved to fly fish, so he took me out fly fishing a lot and did that together.
So, man, you live up in the perfect spot for all those activities.
Yeah. Well, I don't think it's a coincidence. My parents built a little house outside of Bend back in the 60s, and when my wife and I were looking to relocate, it was a pretty easy place to land because, lo and behold, we're still into all the things you can do here in Bend.
Yeah. Well, and Bend was probably still pretty quiet then.
Oh, in the 60s for sure.
Yeah.
Even when we moved here almost 16 years ago, it was a lot quieter then than it is now.
Yeah, I was had Bob Woodward on the show a couple weeks ago, and he was telling me that the growth came when they moved the city limits. It was interesting how they moved the lines, and boom, exploded.
Yeah. Well, Woody lives about a block and a half from me. So
cool. Awesome.
We're in the same place.
You don't hang out with him at the what's it called, tourist free zone in the afternoons, do you?
Yeah. I don't see as much of Woody as I'd like to. But,
yeah. He's awesome. Yeah.
He's hard to keep up with.
Man, he's a busy guy. You're right. Yeah. So you've been with the Conservation Alliance for a long time. I didn't realize you'd been there that long, 15 years. Tell everybody a little bit about the Conservation Alliance in case they don't know.
Yeah, sure thing. I've actually, if you add board service, I've been involved with the Alliance going back to 1996. So
wow, awesome.
More like 20 plus years.
Yeah.
The Conservation Alliance was co-founded by Patagonia, North Face, REI, and Kelty. And those four companies came together around a shared belief that the outdoor industry needed to do more collectively to ensure that wild places are protected for both recreation and habitat values. Mm-hmm. So those companies came up with a very simple model that we're still using today, through which companies in the industry pay annual dues into a central fund, and then twice a year we give away whatever's in that fund to local to regional organizations working to secure permanent protection for specific places.
Awesome, yeah. And we've been on the beneficiary end of that at Cal Wild, and our local Friends of the Inyo, I think, have gotten Conservation Alliance grants over the years.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, any organization that has a credible campaign to secure new wilderness protection or national monument designations, wild and scenic river protections.
Right.
And we also do land acquisition, anything that's basically permanent protection for a specific place that has a recreation upside. That's our sweet spot.
That's awesome. And how many members are there, brand members today?
Yeah, today we're north of 210 members.
Wow, awesome.
We've grown a lot since 1989. The first year, I think in '89, we gave away $40,000, and this year we're aiming for about $1.8 million.
Holy cow!
So it's really exciting to see how the industry has come together around conservation through the Conservation Alliance.
Well, yeah, we'll get into that in a little bit, but it's a huge battle right now, that's for sure.
Yeah, you aren't kidding.
And how has your role changed over the years?
Well, like I say, I started as a board member.
Yeah,
so when I was at Patagonia, as a founder, Patagonia had a permanent seat on the board, and I was the designated representative from Patagonia. So I did that for 7 years.
Okay.
Back then, we didn't have any paid staff. And,
interesting.
we didn't have. I was also the first paid staff. So when I made the decision to leave Patagonia and move back to Oregon, and one thought I had was, hey, it would be great to see if we could raise enough operating money to support a full-time executive director position at the Conservation Alliance.
Right.
And at the time, I was still on the board, but I knew I was on my way out, and my fellow board members said, yeah, go for it. If you can make that happen, that would be great.
Cool.
So it took a couple of years, and but I did some kind of contract fundraising for the Conservation Alliance, and then we were fortunate to have a great opportunity with Keen Footwear, where they decided to divert money out of their ad buy for several years and give that money instead to nonprofit organizations.
Oh, very cool.
And they made a big contribution to us that basically stood up the staff position and gave us enough money to open an office and really get the thing rolling as a staffed organization. So to answer your question, I went from board member to sort of contract, very part-time contract,
to leader of the pack.
Yeah, to staff, and every step of the way is a little bit different. Right. Now we have 3.5 full-time employees, and we're starting to feel like a more mature organization. Right.
And you guys, do you have any members that are non-branded or outside the outdoor industry?
We do. Yeah, it's a good question. We will always be primarily focused on the outdoor industry, but there are what we call like-minded companies and sister industries that we think would really like our model, and we've started recruiting first from the craft brewing world.
Oh, interesting.
So we now have Deschutes Brewery and Founders Brewery and New Belgium in the membership, and we see that as a real opportunity to kind of link we think of it as trail to tavern.
Yeah, trail to tavern, peak to pub. Yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah, I didn't realize that. Awesome.
Yeah, so we've just started in on that, but it's had some pretty good success so far, and we look forward to including more of those folks. And there's some adventure travel folks. Are they members, or they're just donate? They donate regularly. How's that work? There are some outdoor brands that are crossover into adventure travel, like Eagle Creek, right? And then we are members of the Adventure Travel Trade Association, and they are members of the Conservation Alliance. Gotcha. So we definitely have some overlap there. And one of my coworker here, Josie Norris, serves on the board of the new Adventure Travel Conservation Fund, which is sort of the adventure travel industry's take on the Conservation Alliance, and that just has gotten off the ground in the last couple of years. Yeah, and they pretty much follow the Conservation Alliance model, right? They're trying to use that format for their fund. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I'm good buds with Steve Barker. We talk about that a lot. So that's awesome. Yeah, that's very cool. Yeah. And so over the years, I guess, the public lands issue has evolved and the outdoor industry issue has evolved. What are your thoughts on how the outdoor industry has changed in relationship to conservation and the Conservation Alliance over the years? Well, for a long time, I would say the Conservation Alliance has been the most consistent advocate for conservation and public lands in our industry. But along the way, we have worked closely with Outdoor Industry Association and other partners in the industry. But it's always been our core purpose. Right. That's your mission. Protect lands, and the vast majority of our funding has always gone to public lands efforts, meaning Forest Service, BLM, Park Service, things like that. Lands that we already own, and our collective will can influence the management of those lands.
Mm-hmm.
So, for a long time, I think our industry has sort of taken public lands for granted, and I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with that. I mean, the history of public lands is that, hey, this is like your American birthright.
Yeah, they've always been there. We haven't had any issues with going to, use them, or, many people have provided more public lands over the years until recently. So you're right. I grew up thinking, let's go to the BLM, let's go to the Forest Service. It's, whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know you spent a lot of time on the east side of the Sierra.
Yeah.
Boy, I mean, imagine what life would be like there without
I can't imagine it. Yeah.
Yosemite or the John Muir Wilderness or the Ansel
Right.
Adams Wilderness. I mean, it's there. It's always there.
Yeah.
And I think there have been murmurings of tension over public lands for the better part of the last decade,
Mm-hmm.
but it never got real until November of last year, when
Right.
suddenly we had a small but powerful group of members of Congress that really just don't think the federal government should be managing any land at all,
Right.
and they'd like to see that land sold off or transferred to states. And we always had a backstop in the White House that wouldn't let that happen.
Right.
Well, that backstop's gone, and we don't know a lot about what President Trump thinks about public lands, and I'm not sure he does, but
Yeah.
we know that he is a transactional guy, and if there's members of Congress that want something from him, and it doesn't matter that much to him, then he just might let them get away with it, knowing that someday he might need something from them.
Yeah, he'll
And-
execute on it. Yeah, no, that's a good way to look at it. Yeah, I've never heard it explained that way. That's great. Transactional. That's a perfect description.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, I mean, I'm sure your next question is going to be about, where the industry's been this year.
There you go.
Around that. I'll let you ask it though.
That's okay. No, I was curious. Before I was going to ask that, has the Conservation Alliance ever been involved? Any of the money you're giving away to go towards the purchase of lands for a land trust kind of thing?
Sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'd say probably 2/3 of our funding goes to projects that rely on federal lands.
Mhm.
So whether it's a wilderness campaign or a national monument campaign or
Right.
any of that. And probably 1/3 of it is either private land acquisitions or, work in Canada, which is a whole different ball of wax.
Mhm.
But yeah, in some parts of the country, we just don't have public lands, or we don't have much to speak of.
Right.
So we have a long history of funding acquisitions in New England, for example, or the southeastern U.S. And even out west, there are some great opportunities to purchase land, and often to purchase land adjacent to federally owned land to
Right.
make an even bigger conservation area. So yeah, we're very active, and honestly, moving forward, I think we're going to be doing more and more private land work because Congress is not moving legislation much these days.
Yeah.
And,
No legislation, let alone land legislation.
right. And we're not expecting the Trump administration to, grace us with any good national monuments. So
Right.
private land is more and more important to us.
So what do you think the future looks like? I mean, is this going to be a long-term battle? My thought are I don't think they're going to be around for much more than 4 years, but who knows?
Yeah. I bet you if you talk to people who were engaged in public lands work 20 years ago, they would say that, hey, this happens now and then.
Yeah.
Whether we start taking stuff for granted or the opposition gets politically more powerful, every now and then the stars align for a moment like this where we have to have a nationwide conversation about what public lands mean to us.
Mm-hmm.
And with Trump's national monument review and some proposed legislation in Congress that would transfer federal lands to the states, we have no choice but to have that conversation right now. And I choose to be optimistic. I believe strongly in our strength as a community of businesses that care about public lands, and I've spent the last 25 years trying to steer business resources into our nonprofit community that works to protect these lands every day.
Right.
So I believe that if we truly have a national conversation about public lands, we're going to come out the other end stronger. And you see that with this National Monument Review.
Right.
2.7 million people
Right.
commented about the national monuments under review, and 98% of those comments said don't change a thing.
Right. Well, there's so many people on both sides of the aisle that use those lands. I mean, Democrats and Republicans alike, liberals and conservatives, we all, whether we hunt, fish, hike, backpack, climb, whatever it is, it's a lot of times on public lands.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And the main problem I see is that most people don't know what public lands are. They don't know the difference between the Forest Service and the Park Service and the BLM. They don't know the difference between a wilderness area and a national park. Mm-hmm. And so that's one thing we're doing as an organization. We just hired a new position to build a new advocacy program, the foundation of which will be to go around to all of our member companies and give them a training on the public land system.
Perfect.
And give them very clear tools that they can use to be more engaged advocates for public lands.
Right. That's a great idea.
So it's things like this. We haven't made that investment before because we didn't feel like we had to.
Yeah.
And now we do. And so when you say how long are we going to be dealing with this, I think we always have to be vigilant about public lands, and I hope that this moment in history is kind of a revival of commitment to and interest in public lands from the people who use them all the time. Yeah.
Well, and if nothing else, it's an opportunity to educate everybody not only about the system, but all the opportunities on the various lands, and just work a little harder to make sure that everybody knows what's going on, how to go out there, how to access them, how to use them respectfully. I mean, that's huge upside.
Yeah, absolutely. And I live in Bend, where our population is just booming, and it's starting to impact the Forest Service lands around us. Right. Trails are getting more crowded, and it's there's definitely the opportunity to have this conversation, but I don't think at the end of that conversation people are going to say, we should get rid of these.
No,
or we should stop.
Right, right.
Yeah, I think it's going to be absolutely the opposite.
I think you're right. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, we see the same thing here, although it's not the local population; it's the folks that come up from down south. But it's just Yosemite's getting loved to death. But even there for a while, you'd go backpacking over here and wouldn't see anybody. And now, in the last 3 to 5 years, you see there's a couple tents around the lake when you get to the lake that night. So it's cool to see.
Yeah, and that's that's the balance. You want people to. The strongest advocates for these places are the people who actually visit them and have those life-changing experiences on them.
Right. So I guess I know that brands donate money to the Conservation Alliance and other groups. How can brands and retailers and individuals get more involved? What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, well, whether they know it or not, I think brands and retailers and individuals in the outdoor industry are super lucky to have a lot of meaningful opportunities to get more involved, whether it's financially through the Conservation Alliance, or we have a great trade association, the Outdoor Industry Association, that is doing more to get people involved in advocating. They have a great team in Washington, D.C. that keeps an eye on bills, good and bad, all the time.
Right.
So it's, I think a lot depends on where you're based, what are the issues in your local area. I usually tell people, first and foremost, you need to get plugged in locally, because the old saying about all politics is local, it's true. Right. And pretty much every community, at least in the Western United States and elsewhere, every community within spitting distance of public lands has a good public lands organization. And I encourage people to get involved with those groups, find out what's going on in those lands, and give their time, give their money. But then businesses have a unique opportunity right now. Our industry is finally being recognized as an economic driver in the country. And thanks to the OIA study about the rec economy, that's gotten some recognition.
Well, they have a different perspective of us now. They realize that, holy cow, there is some revenue being generated and jobs being created. It's not just, I think as Sally Jules said, it's not just a bunch of tree huggers out there.
Yeah, no, it's real deal.
Yeah,
and
it's awesome.
Not to mention the nonprofits that are supporting public lands. I joke that we're a job creator. I've built now 4 jobs in Bend, Oregon.
Yeah.
And, but, so these businesses have opportunities to work with, for example, the Conservation Alliance. If you want to be a part of securing new protection for lands, you have a very easy way to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And the value proposition with us is you pay dues into our fund. It joins the dues of 210 other companies. And we're giving away, almost $2 million a year to groups working every day to protect land. And we don't take a nickel of that to support our operation. We raise all that separately.
Gotcha.
So people and brands can both contribute that way.
Mm.
We also have an advocacy program that I mentioned earlier where we're going to be, giving people training and tools to be good advocates for public lands. And the OIA is doing similar things. But I get back to this thing. I think the most important thing is first plug in locally, and that's what we're going to be encouraging our members to do on the local level. Make sure their members of Congress understand how important public lands are to their business.
Yeah, and make sure they hear about it regularly. Yeah, well, we'll put links to all these organizations in the show notes to you guys and some of the local groups that are involved here. That's awesome.
Yeah, great.
So shifting gears a little bit, what opportunities do you see in the outdoor biz for young people just starting out, getting out of college, or maybe before they go to college, they want to get a degree and focus on outdoors?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I mean, I'm more your generation than the 20-something that
the digital natives.
Yeah, the old school answer is you go get a job in an outdoor retail shop and you work your way from there.
Right.
Which is, I think, what you did, and that's definitely what I did.
And I've talked to a few folks on the show. I think that's still a viable opportunity, although it may be not as prevalent as it was back in my day, but still an opportunity. There's still some great retail shops out there.
Yeah, there are, and there's no better way to understand the industry than to work in a shop and sell the product and get to know the customer.
Right.
The cool thing now is that there are more and more degree programs in outdoor. In the outdoor business. I know Portland State University has a program, University of Utah has a program, and Oregon State. Here in Bend, the Cascades campus is just pulling together a new program for a degree in the outdoor industry. So, there's the old school way, get a job in retail.
Yeah.
There's the, getting education in it. I also think, there's a growing, I wouldn't say it's a big part of the industry. There aren't a whole lot of jobs doing the kind of stuff I do, but I have seen some successful transitions from the nonprofit conservation community into the outdoor business world.
Right.
And there are more companies looking for individuals who can help that company craft a plan to get engaged in whether it's conservation or human rights or whatever.
Right.
The younger generation is looking for brands to stand for something more than just good product.
Yeah.
And I know a handful of people in our industry who made that transition and are highly valued employees because they had experience working for a conservation group or some other kind of social change organization.
Yeah, that's good advice. Yeah. Yeah, that's a great idea. And how about for folks that are maybe already in the biz, maybe they're at retail or they're in customer service, any advice on how they can grow their career?
Yeah, that's trickier because it really depends on what company you're working for.
And what path you want to take,
Yeah, I spent 7 years at Patagonia, which always made opportunities available to everyone in the company to do employee development programs or internships with conservation groups. So there were definitely internal ways to move into and up the chain with new experiences. That may not be the case at every brand, but I'm really encouraged in part by the growth of our own membership and by dozens of conversations I've had with leaders of companies in our industry that are really trying to figure out how they express their commitment to, making the world a better place to live.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I think anyone who's got, whether they're in customer service or in a retail floor, who has that motivation, I think there are more and more companies that are going to recognize that and find opportunities for that person to move up.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yep. That's good advice. So shifting gears again, let's talk about what outdoor activities do you still participate in? You're a big runner, correct? You do a lot of running?
I used to be mostly a climber and a skier, and now I have 2 young kids, and I find I have to fit my outdoor stuff into shorter windows of.
Right.
So I do a lot of trail running and mountain biking and road cycling. But in the winter, I'm still up in the mountains skiing, and
nice.
Took up Nordic skiing about 5 years ago, and that's been a nice way to enjoy snow in again with a shorter window of time.
Right,
I just did a nice 12-mile loop in a wilderness area before work yesterday. So
awesome.
Living in a place like Bend has you can do that still.
Yeah, I'm headed out this weekend to go up over the Sierra. Spend a couple nights, 3 nights out in the backcountry. So it is nice to have it close.
Sweet. Yeah, I miss the Sierra. Oregon kind of got screwed on the granite front. And, I miss that high elevation granite and lakes.
It's pretty unique. Yeah, pretty unique. Yeah. And how about some of your favorite books? Do you give books as gifts, or do you have any favorite books that you want to suggest to our listeners?
Yeah, I've had a few over the years that I've given out. I at a pretty impressionable age read David James Duncan's The River Why.
Great book.
Which is a great kind of coming of age story about a guy, a fly fishing guy.
Right.
And kind of weaves in the meaning of life and things like that. So that's one for sure. Big fan of Wallace Stegner. Mm-hmm. Angle of Repose is a great book because it takes in kind of the development of the West, and then I was really fortunate to work for about 5 years for Earth Island Institute, which was founded by David Brower.
Oh wow, awesome! Yeah.
If your listeners don't know who David Brower is, they should Google him right away and come up to speed. But John McPhee wrote a wonderful profile of Brower called Encounters with the Archdruid, which I think is just one of the, definitely top 2 or 3 conservation reading material that I always recommend to people.
Yeah, awesome.
And in part because I had a personal connection to the subject, but it's just a great read.
Yeah, we'll put links to those in the show notes too. That's awesome. How about your best or favorite piece of gear under $100? Gear purchase?
That is an awesome question because I'm finding the older I get, the more I value the inexpensive gear. And
well, we've already bought the expensive gear a couple times over, probably, right?
Yeah. Well, I definitely would say the Patagonia Houdini jacket I use probably more than just about anything.
Okay, cool, awesome. Yep.
There's a bunch of little things like my Dynafit ski leashes, the coiled ones that stretch and then they stay compact. Right. I think those retail for like $14.
Yeah, cool. Oh, we'll link to both of those in the show notes. That's awesome. Those are good ones. Yeah, I like that.
I could think of some more if you want a longer list.
If you think of anything that we should absolutely have to have on the list, just shoot me an email.
I have to say to any skiers out there, I'm hooked on the very light Skimo setup for backcountry skiing. I got a setup of La Sportiva skis and boots a few years ago, and again, it's a concession to age, but pushing super lightweight gear, I find I can go further into the backcountry, and I wake up the next day and I'm not in pain.
Yeah, exactly. I'm excited about all the new lightweight cameras. I just got a new Sony, so I don't have to haul that big, heavy glass and stuff around anymore. It makes a huge difference.
Yeah, right. But none of that's under $100.
No. Yeah, no. That's well over. Do you have any favorite tools or apps or podcasts you use to maintain your sanity or get inspiration?
I have to say that on the podcast front, I've had to tune some of it out because I learned from the election last year that and podcasts, I think, are a big part of this. Mm-hmm. We are now so able to just choose the voices that agree with us.
Right.
And I found myself last year listening to about 5 political podcasts that had me convinced on election day that everything was going to be fine.
Well, I think a lot of people had everybody convinced that it was going the other way. That was a big miss.
Yeah. So, I think if I was a better human being, I would start watching Fox News and really trying to understand the other side more. Mm-hmm. But my response has been, for about the last 6 months, I can't listen to any of them. And I listen to podcasts about the Portland Trailblazers and the Portland Timbers.
There you go.
I'm a closet sports fan from my childhood in Portland.
There you go. Yeah, same.
That keeps me sane.
Cool.
And Wait, Don't Tell Me.
Oh, that's a good one too. Yeah. The NPR has some great podcasts, man. Yeah. No, I have a good friend here, Alan Pietrasano. I think you know Alan. He's way involved in the public lands issues, and he's probably one of the guys I know who interacts the most with the other side all the time. He's always having lunch or meeting somebody for a beer or going down to talk to someone on the other side of the issue just to learn what they're thinking, and he's fabulous at it. So it's doable.
Yeah, good for him.
It's doable. Anything else you want to say to our audience or ask of our audience?
These are interesting times. We got to stay strong, and I do encourage everyone to get involved in whatever way makes sense for them.
Cool.
But most importantly, don't forget to get out and enjoy your wilderness areas and your public lands, because that's how you regenerate your passion to protect these places.
Yeah. Awesome. And then how can people find you? On LinkedIn is the best spot?
I'm on LinkedIn.
Yeah, okay.
That's probably the easiest place. And
okay.
Where you can always follow the Conservation Alliance at conservationalliance.com or on our Facebook page.
Cool. Yeah, we'll put links to all that in the show notes. Well, awesome, John. I appreciate the time. It's been good chatting with you. And
thanks, Rick. Always a pleasure.
Have a great weekend.
You too.
All right. Bye-bye. All right. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with John Sterling. You can find John on LinkedIn and follow the Conservation Alliance at conservationalliance.com and on Facebook. You can find links to all the info we discussed in the show notes at theoutdoorbizpodcast.com/episodes/028. I appreciate the support and feedback. Please be sure and share your favorite episodes on the socials. And until next time, thank you so much for listening. This episode's featured advocacy group is the California Wilderness Coalition. CalWild is a nonprofit whose mission is to protect and restore the wildest natural landscapes and watersheds on California's public lands. Since 1976, CalWild has helped protect over 14 million acres of wilderness and 1,500 miles of wild and scenic rivers. The organization helps bridge the gap between local stewards who know their public lands intimately and the state and federal agencies that manage those lands, forming valuable partnerships at all levels. Become a member today at the $65 family level, and they'll send you a copy of Tim Palmer's book, California Glaciers, for free. Join today at calwild.org/biz. If you want more of the Outdoor Biz Podcast, you can subscribe on iTunes and Stitcher, or go to theoutdoorbizpodcast.com, where you find all the episodes, show notes, and much, much more. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram at The Outdoor Biz Podcast, Twitter at Rick_Saez, that's S-A-E-Z, and my email is rick@theoutdoorbizpodcast.com. Thanks for listening and all the support, and a huge shout out to all my guests, and until next time, be sure to make time to get outside.